So now we've got 3 animated cameras. I'm going to create a stage object, and this is going to allow us to create an edit inside Cinema 4D, because at the moment we can only kind of flick through the individual cameras. So this is going to allow us to actually keyframe to switch between the cameras. So if I press Shift C and look for stage, I'm actually going to drop all of these into a null. Now if I go to the first frame of the animation and with stage selected, I'm going to go to the Object tab here, and I'm going to drop the first camera in. Let's label these. So it's camera 1, it's camera 2, and 3. So again, stage selected, I'm going to drop the first camera in. And that's going to take us inside the first camera. And I'm going to put a keyframe by pressing Control and pressing the little red light. We're putting a keyframe saying that we want at frame 0, we want camera 1 to be used by the stage object. Then if we scrub along, at frame 50, we want camera 2 to come in. So I'm just going to make sure the stage object selected, drag camera 2 into the camera here, and then again Control and press the keyframe here. And that's going to say at frame 50, please change the camera to camera 2. So now if we scrub back, press play, that's changing. Then at frame 100, we're going to do the same thing. Stage selected, drag camera 3 in and put a keyframe in. So now we should be able to play that, and that's going to play our edit. Finally, we're going to add a couple of nulls in order to tell the cameras where we want to focus on, because we're going to add some depth of field once we get into Octane. In order to do that, I'm going to select on create a null. I'm going to put it inside the camera. And then I'm going to zero everything out. And then come into my 4 views here. I'm just going to move that down and position that to the design, so we're actually focusing on the height of the actual design. And I'm going to take the null outside of the Z position because we don't want it to animate. We want it to stay in that fixed position because the design doesn't change with the camera. I'm going to call that DO depth of field 1. Now in order for the camera to select this null as its focal point, we're going to head into the camera and go to Object, and then drop this null into the focus object. And you can see there that that's actually moved this box here, and you can move that box by just moving the null. So you can actually animate the depth of field if you like. So we could keyframe this null. But for now, I'm just going to position that to the top of the design. I'm going to do that with the others as well. So I'm just going to copy this into the other cameras. Again, zero that out and find where that actually is. Now I'm going to move that down to the design again. Take it out of the Z position. Just keep it inside the camera 2 there. I'm going to label it DO depth of field 2. And then selecting on the camera, head to the Object tab and drop that into the focus object. And again, that moves that box so it's focusing on that. I'll do the same with camera 3 and then we'll check that they're in the right positions. We probably don't need depth of field for the final shot. So now, if I scrub back to frame 0 and select on the depth of field, just make sure that it's actually positioned correctly. take that out and 0 these axes and drop it in, so that way the Y is actually pointing upwards. And do the same with shot 2, so we can just see where it's positioned. Let's take that out, 0 the coordinates, and then drop it back in. So what I've realized I haven't done for cameras 2 and 3 is put an Instagram kind of guide into the cameras to make sure that what we've got inside the frame's interesting and center aligned and all that sort of things. So I'm going to head to frame 50 and just copy and paste the rectangle from camera 1 into camera 2 and 0 those out and drop out of my view. So it's just touching the top of the frame here. And I'll just do the same with camera 3. I'm going to head to frame 100. Drop that down until touching the tops of the frames. It is showing me that we could actually bring the design over a bit. It's cutting out some of the information here. Let's have a look. I think the reason it doesn't feel aligned is because some of the pieces are actually higher than others. It should be okay. So now that we've got our animated cameras and created an edit using the stage object, let's render the animation to see it play back in real time. I'm going to clean the file up a bit so we don't have the camera information in the render. So in order to do that, I'm going to select the top null and go down to basic. And I'm going to turn it off in Visible in Editor and Visible in Renderer. Because the stage object is a child of the top null here, if we scrub through, it's not actually using the stage object. The stage object isn't active. And in order to fix that, we just need to turn it on in the editor and renderer. So if we select on the stage object and go on and on, you'll see that that's actually fixed that, and it's made these two little buttons here green. That's an important note. If the stage object isn't working, it's probably because it's in a parent that's been turned off, or the little tick here isn't activated. Just always need to make sure that that's on in order for the stage object to be active. Cool. So making sure that nothing's selected, just pressing on the Object tab here. I'm going to go to my render settings. Let's render it to our folder. Go to Working, C4D, and I'm just going to create a render folder here. And I'll call this Animatic 01. And the reason I'm calling it animatic is because it's an edit of the animation timings of our design before we start lighting and texturing it. So it's always good to create an animatic to preview the animation before we spend too much more time on it. So now that's set up, let's render this. Making sure that all frames It's selected, 25 frames per second, 1280 by 720 is fine. Let's render. Go to render to picture viewer. It's going to bring up our picture viewer and start rendering. I'm rendering in MP4 as well, so just make sure that you've set that up in your render settings. So now that's finished, let's click out of that and head to our Cinema 4D directory and the render folder. And if I double click on that, I'm just going to pause and make sure it's on repeat so I can see it loop. That's our animatic.
Now that we know how to animate our cameras and create a hardware render of the animation, it's now time to light our scene, and that's what we're going to do in the next lesson. I'll see you there.